Thank you. Over to you, Jana.
Thank you very much, Sally. Welcome to CPA Australia's webinar, New Technologies Impact on Early Career Accountant Skill Set. My name is Jana Schmitz, and I'm the Technical Advisor for Assurance and Emerging Technologies at CPA Australia. We have people joining from all over the world for today's webinar. A special welcome to my colleague Deborah Leung, CPA Australia's Executive General Manager of International, who is attending from Hong Kong today. Good morning to you, Deborah. Now, before we start, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from around Australia and pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. I extend this acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us today. And now, before we start, I would like to introduce you to today's session's chair, Professor Michael Devon. Michael is the Chair of Accounting and Business Information Systems at the University of Melbourne, and he is also a member of CPA Australia's Digital Transformation Centre of Excellence. Now, Michael, before I hand over to you, I would just like to draw everyone's attention to a CPA Australia Commission research study that Michael and his team from Uni Melbourne have conducted late last year in 2019. The title of the study is Technology and the Future of the Profession, and I'm going to provide the link to that report in the chat box in a minute. Now, the study explains how robotic process automation, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and data analytics impact on the nature of the work carried out by accountants and auditors. And the results of that study complement the research study undertaken by our panelists of today's webinar, who will now be introduced by Michael. So, Michael, I hand over to you. Welcome.
Thanks, Jana, and thanks everybody for joining us today for what promised to be an exciting and interesting presentation. So today we have Associate Professor Denise Jackson from Edith Cowan University, Grant Michelson from Macquarie University, and Rahat Munir from Macquarie University presenting to us on the impact of new technology on the desired skills of early career accountants. And as Jana said, having looked at some of the impacts of technology and spent the last 30 years of my career balancing between these two areas, I'm really excited to see what's changing and what's needed from our early career accountants. I remember back into the 1980s when the people were talking about the paperless office, which we still haven't got, and let's see what the future really holds for our graduates and our aspiring CPAs. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Denise to present.
Thanks, Michael, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are at the moment. So just to give you a bit of background to our project, we wanted to first, before we started talking to stakeholders, get an idea of what's happening with regards to technology in the profession. So we reviewed a number of recent literature, such as Michael's study, and also industry-based projects or reports and government reports from all over the world. And it was very clear to us that there's been an increased uptake of technological solutions and tools by accountants and auditors. And there's been a real shift from traditional accounting and auditing to that virtual engagement and digitisation of processes. And that certainly, I'm sure we've all felt, has become more pronounced during COVID, the COVID period. And we found that for some organisations, this has posed a risk because it's really important that they keep pace with all these new emerging technologies. And really what they're requiring from their staff is that they are tech savvy in a number of different ways. And that's for new graduates entering into the industry, early career accountants, and those that have been operating in the profession for some time. And there has been, we could see some concern in the profession that they don't have the suitable mix of skills in their staff, and also in graduates that are transitioning into the workplace. And that can be highly problematic for organisations because they need to make sure that they can respond to these new technologies, they can leverage them, and that they're sufficiently agile in Industry 4.0 that we're all operating in. So one of the key things that we saw was the automation of lower level tasks, and I know that's been highly publicised in reports such as that was released by the CEDA Association back in 2015, and even the World Economic Forum, they released a report in 2018, and again just a couple of weeks ago, around the future of jobs and how there's been that automation of the lower level tasks in accounting. And instead, the traditional role as kind of number cruncher has now shifted to more analysing data, interpreting information, and then using that for complex problem solving and adding value to clients' businesses. So in terms of the key new technologies that we could see in recent years, you can see them in bullet points there as intelligent automation, robotic process automation, machine learning, examples of blockchain and cloud-based software. So this is really how we framed new technologies when we went to our stakeholders to discuss that with them. In terms of the actual what we wanted to find during the project, we had some key research questions. The first one being, what are the required skills of early career accountants and how does technology impact on these? And the second one was, how prepared are early career accountants for technology? And does this vary by sector? So we wanted to see how that varied across the not-for-profit sector, across the public government sector, and by private sector. And also to see if there was an impact, if that varied by organisation type, so specifically by organisation size, so small ranging up to the larger businesses. And also a concern of ours, another line of inquiry, was really around how effective is current provision. So are these accountants suitably prepared, and is it universities that are best positioned perhaps to develop early career accountants, or in terms of their preparedness for technology, or is it actually the businesses themselves that are best positioned to develop those technology-enabled skills? And also, what is the role of professional associations such as CPA Australia? In terms of who we spoke to, we had two groups of participants in the project. We had managers and recruiters of early career accountants, and you can see that we surveyed 175 of those and interviewed 10 of them. And then we had 350 early career accountants, and 10 of those we interviewed. And in terms of how we defined an early career accountant, that was someone who had undertaken a degree, and that's any degree, that's recognising that the accounting profession is increasingly recruiting from disciplines outside of accounting, and also that they've worked for 1 to 5 years in the profession in an accounting role. Just a quick background into demographics. Across both of those groups, the split was broadly 40% female to 60% male. Interestingly, we found with the age of the early career accountants themselves, we found that around 1/3 were aged 29 years or under, but interestingly, around 45% were aged between 30 and 39, and then just under 1/5 were aged over 40 years. So that really highlighted to us that these were people that had an earlier career and then seemed to have transitioned into accounting after some time in a different industry. In terms of spread across the different organisation types, for the early career accountants, around 1/5 were from the Big Four. Just more than that were in terms of the managers and recruiters, there were more from the Big Four. And then we only had around 10% from the not-for-profit and public sector, and the rest were from the private sector, albeit more from the medium and large-size firms. So moving on to our key findings, we wanted to know what are the skills for success and how have these changed given the impact of technology. And the way we interpreted these skills is we drew on a professional capabilities framework which was established in 2011 in consultation with industry, and that has 10 capabilities which you can see in italics there on that screen. And this framework was actually reviewed earlier this year, again in consultation with industry, to make sure that it really reflected the future-oriented capabilities that we need of contemporary workers. As you can see from there, from the first bullet point, there was a strong emphasis among the groups in terms of the need for data and technology skills in staff, in the accounting profession, and also communication. And the way that data and technology is packaged up in that capabilities framework is it's around being able to analyse and interpret data and apply it in different contexts, and also select and use and leverage different forms of technology, and also retrieve and evaluate and use information in both digital and printed formats. Accounting knowledge came up as important, and also problem solving. So that goes back to that shift from traditional number crunching processes and data processing to instead complex problem solving and adding value to the clients. And professionalism was something else that shone through. And key areas of that were being able to manage time effectively, being efficient at work, and also being able to build relationships with clients. So really complementing technology. So those were the skills that really shone through for contemporary work. Interestingly, we found we were quite surprised with those that were less emphasised, which you can see in the second bullet point. Working effectively with others, we thought might have been more prominent. As I'm sure you're probably aware, we see it in the media, we see it in government-based reports, employer reports about the importance of collaborative working and teamwork. So we did expect that to feature more greatly. And we also, along with that, expected responsibility and accountability to perhaps be more prominent, given the focus on ethical behaviour in the profession and also its link to technology. So in terms of the impact of technology itself, we found that both groups strongly believe that technology does change and has changed the skills needed for early career accountants to succeed in the profession. And you can see from those figures that that was actually more strongly felt among the early career accountants themselves at 72% compared with 60% of managers. So that I guess that really highlights that we need to be quite mindful that those that are actually in the early stages of their career really feeling the effects of technology acutely, and perhaps managers aren't aware of actually how significantly it's impacting on them. And less than 10% felt that it was of no change or only minor change at all to the skills needed for success. In terms of how that varied across sectors, we did find that those that were working in large private sector organisations felt the effects of technology more greatly than those that work in the public sector. And that really shone through in the interviews. We found that there was a strong sense among those in private sector organisations that there was a real innovate to succeed culture. You know, really, if you wanted to survive in the industry, you had to be responsive to industry, you had to be agile. And with that, you needed staff that were obviously capable of that as well. And, you know, they really felt some of them were thrown into the deep end, and they really had to self-teach almost and keep abreast of technologies in order to keep pace with what was happening in their sector and in their organisation. In terms of the actual ways that technology impacted on skills, so we found 5 common themes there. First of all was actually understanding technologies themselves, and that was really centred around understanding different softwares and also actually being able to embed those technologies into workflows so you can actually leverage it and make, get key benefits from it. The second one was that shift from data processing, which I've mentioned before, to interpreting data and problem solving and adding value. And one thing that was really came up in the interviews was there was some concern among managers and recruiters that those entering the profession were really, because of automation, were really missing out on actually undertaking those lower level tasks that new graduates or new recruits used to be responsible for. So by missing out on those, they're actually kind of almost missing a true understanding of the nuts and bolts of accounting, and instead transitioning to that interpreting data and adding value to clients and being expected to do that much earlier in their careers, which some felt was quite problematic. In terms of the third way, both groups acknowledged that technology may bring about changes in how accounting standards were applied, and it was important to think about how new technologies might impact on that. Another one was about building people skills. So, there was this whole theme around the fact that people skills are absolutely essential to complement technology. So technology brings about this shift in focus to the more humanistic element of operating in today's economy. And the accountant was seen to be a key collaborator in the organisation, where they'd be working in multifunctional teams across different areas and connecting with internal stakeholders at all different levels within the organisation, as well as external stakeholders being clients. And the final way was that there was a shift in focus, it was felt, from technology. The onus was really on the individual. They had to demonstrate personal agency. There was a real need for self-development and lifelong learning. They had to embrace change, they had to embrace technology, and they couldn't wait to be taught those technologies. They had to fine-tune their research skills and go out and understand how they can be used themselves. In terms of preparedness, so 51% of managers believe that early career accountants were mostly or very prepared for technology, compared with 63% of accountants themselves. And I think, both of those figures really highlight the need for careful attention to how we're developing technology related skills in our professionals in the industry. Those in the public sector felt better prepared, and those managers in smaller organisations also were more positive about early career accountants' preparedness. And again, we attributed that to perhaps in those two scenarios of the smaller organisation and the public sector, there wasn't such a diverse stream of new technologies coming through, and that pressure to innovate to survive. They didn't perhaps say there wasn't that same pressure in those two situations. And if their staff weren't put under pressure to master and demonstrate and use those technologies, then yes, they would be perceived to be mastering them or be more technology enabled than others that were more under pressure. In terms of key determinants in preparedness, there were two things that really shone through, and one was exposure to latest technologies, and again that comes down to sectoral differences. So it was really important to prepare people that they don't just see technologies in abstract form, such as during training sessions, rather than they actually need to be on the job and using those technologies. And the other one goes back to that positive attitude to learning. They needed to have that open growth mindset and embrace technology in order to be prepared for it and the change that it brings. And I'm going to pass over to my colleague Grant, who's going to proceed through the next few slides.
Great. Thank you very much, Denise. Again, I thank colleagues here, both in Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, and elsewhere in the world for tuning in today. Building on what Denise has also said about the impact of technology, the preparedness for new technologies, the next logical step that we looked at through this particular study was, well, how do you actually develop? What are the development needs and issues for both this group of 315 early career accountants and the 175 managers and recruiters of these accountants? And what we found here, coming back to that original framework that Denise shared about earlier on, is that particularly things to do with personal agency. So what does personal agency encapsulate? What it means is it talks about engaging with peers, it talks about curiosity, a positive mindset, positive attitude, taking responsibility for your own learning and things like that. And so that the agency element and the ownership of your own career, as well as this lifelong approach to learning. In other words, when we finish university or a technical college in terms of where we may have come from, these things don't actually stop. We're constantly learning, having to adapt and evolve in terms of what we do. Enterprise skills you'll also see there, and in terms of breaking that down again, and just as a reminder, these are things like innovation. How innovative is the early career accountant? Do they take initiative? Are they adaptable to different circumstances and requirements of clients? In other words, to what extent can they roll with the kind of the punches, if you like, of new technology and changing workplaces? So we found that these things were identified by both the early career accountants and the managers as crucial. The networks that people develop, both through university, but in their organisations, the formal training they receive, practice opportunities, people using social media, professional development opportunities such as this webinar, among other things. We found that these things were valued highly by both groups. And you'll see there that basically about half of the managers that we looked at, when we look at the types of organisations that can help develop early career accountants with their preparedness and adaptability to technologies. Managers effectively were rating universities as a pretty positive place in which to deliver on their needs from their perspective. In-house, in fact, was about second, and professional associations came third from a managerial point of view. So what we were sort of finding there is that managers see universities as providing, if you like, the foundational core, the skill sets, the broad stuff of which then organisations and I think professional associations can then build on and complement, extend, refine and so on over time. When we look here at the early career accountants as a group, they were far less certain in terms of classifying 1, 2 and 3. Really, the universities were a little bit lower in terms of how they felt prepared. So again, it may come back to things such as an experience and exposure into workplaces that perhaps more seasoned and experienced managers and recruiters understood their own organisational capabilities and limitations, and early career accountants were still, I guess, feeling their way into workplaces and weren't entirely sure yet whether universities had provided all that they required in terms of preparedness, development towards new technologies. What we did find also here is that where there were specific IT or information systems type units, this really did help early career accountants become more tech savvy during their university careers and life. So I'll move to the next slide. This was also trying to highlight from both the early career accountants and also the manager's point of view when we asked them about all of the three stakeholders, you know, the universities as a source of higher training, in-house organisational training and professional associations. What did we really find here from both groups? We saw here some of the key advantages around universities and higher education institutes really having that capacity to sort of put the foundational elements in place, the core building blocks, core knowledge, core language and jargon and ideas, if you like. What we also found that universities in the main, not exclusively, generally were staffed by highly skilled people, many of whom come and do have CPA and CA and other relevant experience and associations with practice. And they also, if you like, developed and sort of instilled, if you like, the requirement to think about this is the beginning, not the end of your journey. How do you actually develop and build those sort of entrepreneurial, innovative behaviours, adapting to different client needs? So those sorts of aspects were regarded as positive by both the early career accountant group, but also the managers and recruiters of those accountants themselves. On the other hand, you will also see some of the disadvantages that groups identified. The first one's a very interesting one, online study, that was raised more by the managers themselves. They felt that perhaps online study currently through COVID, which has been intensified, some of the managers felt that that had lost some of the human touch and the human connection. The connection through Zoom or Microsoft Teams wasn't quite as fulfilling from a managerial point of view. It also perhaps undermined to some extent some of the group work skills that have traditionally been established through face-to-face settings. On the other hand, and this is sort of the double-edged sword, if you like, of online study and COVID, is that now that we're moving to a more online delivery, improvements in technologies are also coming through the university sector. So universities are now in many countries, Australia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, among others, are also improving their technological delivery, both for pedagogical and teaching purposes, but also how to actually explain the developments of these new technologies. The other thing that we're also finding with the online and the technology evolution, if you like, from a university sector, is that it also opens up some more flexible opportunities for practitioners. So in the past, you might have a guest speaker that comes from industry onto a university campus. He or she might leave their office at a particular time. Now, all of a sudden, the early career accountant who was going to do a guest class can actually do this from his or her office in real time. So, in fact, that actually provides more opportunity and more flexibility to engage. So I think the online study is still probably a work in progress, but at this point in time, our managers certainly were not quite as confident in that as a means of delivery. Some of the other disadvantages you will see there, of course, is those things about, well, are we confident that universities are really able to deliver on the latest technologies? Are universities leading, or are they following, or is it somewhere in between? Also around the training of all staff, are all staff equally competent and proficient in the relevant aspects of the technologies that accountants, auditors, tax specialists all really need to acquire? The other sort of reality was also the focus on, there is an overcrowded curriculum. There are requirements from both professional standards, from various accreditation bodies, both accounting bodies, but also broader accreditation institutions that impact universities about what can be taught. So this notion about the crowding out and to ensure enough space is provided there. I'll move on to the next slide here that also highlighted from both groups the value of the organisations and what was the value of in-house training in particular. And you will see down the left-hand column a range of asserted and stated benefits from both the survey and the interviewees that we looked at. Just reminding you, 315 plus the 175. These were, in a nutshell, the core messages coming through. In-house training, great opportunities for diversity, lots of things to see technology in real use, real time, real use, the complexities, the frustrations, the inhibiting factors, how human factors and technologies kind of merge and blur and sometimes don't always work as required. These were great learning platforms or opportunities from both groups. Often organisations, particularly the larger ones, well-resourced for quality training. Not all, as you'll see on the other side of the equation, not all were able to provide those sorts of resources for, a technology strategy, a great training strategy around technologies, for example. You'll see on the right-hand side again some of the issues driving back from our original sort of questions around the types of organisations. And you'll see there again the public sector, the smaller organisations, weren't able to provide their staff, both managers but also the early career accountants. They didn't really have the same exposure and opportunity to work with, to be familiar with, to understand the implications of these new technologies that Denise highlighted much earlier. Certainly those who were working in the Big Four accounting firms found their in-house training had prepared them much more than others had. And then again, just those notions around, how well and how equally prepared are all organisations to complement that lifelong learning, a sense of personal agency. So there's some unevenness in terms of the sector and where early career accountants are placed in terms of their current careers. I'll move to the next slide. This was again just something here about what professional associations can also do. So with our first stakeholder, universities, our second stakeholder, the in-house organisational training, the third one was also how professional associations such as the CPA can also complement and contribute into this space. And our sort of working, if you like, proposition is that, key bodies, professional bodies like the CPA have to be at the forefront of this, along with organisations and universities. So we saw here short courses, the micro-credentials, the small packaging and badging of small, short units for upskilling, not degree length, not even diploma or certificate length, but very short micro-credentials that over time can also be badged and worked into credit if that person so chooses and desires. We found that this was a particularly useful way, and for those smaller organisations without the resources and without perhaps a sophisticated technology strategy to kind of deal with and evolve with these technologies as they were emerging. And really our sort of synthesis here was trying to sort of highlight how together these three stakeholders to collaborate really together to try and prepare this group of early career accountants who are no more than 5 years into their accounting career, if you like. So we found these 5 particular areas that drew out from the data and from the evidence that we collected. This notion about really having a curriculum that uses real data, real organisations, not simulation necessarily, to see real life case studies from whether it's a Singaporean organisation, a New Zealand one, a British one, Australian and so on. Authentic curriculum also included bringing in, where possible, computer science and the implications of good insights and understanding around information systems and the latest around computer science. The practical case studies, really valuable, hands-on application practice. Internships, opportunities to spend short, medium or longer periods of time in organisations, feeling, smelling, seeing, living the kinds of experience of how technology actually is practiced and how it works. Industry guest speakers, and I drew on that point a few minutes ago around the notion around, in fact, that this is a great opportunity perhaps in the online world that industry guest speakers can actually now be more accessible, and particularly across country time zones. So I'm looking at this also as something that we can actually continue to build upon. The course and program consultative committees, really essential, of course, from our data that showed that practitioners have to kind of be part of the curriculum development, and also about keeping the membership fresh. Making sure that the members, the CPA members who are on university consultative committees, for example, are actually at the cutting edge of their fields and are really on top of what is happening out there in industry. That really gives our graduates who then become early career accountants just that much more confidence and competence in what they'll be doing. Drawing, if you like, to our last couple of slides here around calls to action. So in other words, these are trying to kind of highlight, if you like, some implications to take a little bit further. And really, you can sort of see down here that there's a range of implications. So calls to actions are really things about implications, but what does it mean for us as early career accountants and managers in these firms? And what we're saying here is together is really thinking about that notion that Denise highlighted, moving away from traditional numbers and thinking about the sort of the bread and butter accounting to really sort of the business partner, business advisor, the value add, the dealing with client needs, working with boards inside organisations, and really sort of shifting, if you like, the mindset and the nature of the skill set that modern accountants and auditors and tax people need to have. Also around the notion of the how. How does actually technology work? It's great to talk about it in theory, but how does it actually work? How do you see it work? What are the challenges, the frustrations? Those are some really important things here that we need to do. Accounting standards. In other words, accounting standards are living document. You know, they evolve, they change. In what way has blockchain now needing to be sort of looked at in a fresh light, if you like, with the accounting standards and putting those juxtaposed alongside each other? The relationship building, the people skills that Denise highlighted earlier, the teamwork skills, the collaborative skills, the working effectively with others. You know, we're becoming far more technologically dependent on each other and on this new evolution. And this notion about, you know, the innovative mindset, the lifelong learning that we've already highlighted. Move to the next one very quickly there. So what we're seeing here is particularly opportunities for both universities and associations like CPA is really sort of highlighting those elements: teamwork, collaboration, conflict resolution, cultural and diversity awareness. Those are those sort of key elements. The responsibility and accountability that accountants have always sort of held dear. But in fact, what we're saying is that if anything, the ethical dimensions of new technology are actually opening up new questions for organisations too. Support around benchmarking of performance. Certainly performance and KPIs remain as critical as ever in terms of that, but being very conscious that early career accountants need a little bit more support around this. They might, you know, managers are perceiving that their more junior staff need a little bit more support. So that is a real implication for us here. Organisations need to really step up to the plate and be conscious of those issues. Also around the professional associations, you know, the webinars, the podcasts, the other resources that are provided there, the examinations process around technology, the constant evolution around that in terms of helping to shape and influence managers and the expectations they have. And of course, also one thing that's really highlighted from the study is just how much that particularly the smaller organisations, the public sector, the not-for-profits, those sorts of organisations don't always have the capability. So places like the CPA and others can really sort of step up and provide targeted and specific resourcing and contribute to the skilling and if you like, capability development there. Moving to our final slide, and I'll just quickly evaluate. Really, the main point there is this notion of really this partnership, and what we argue for is a sort of a great collaborative process. Not one of the three stakeholders can really do this alone. It's not reliant only on universities or the organisations themselves, or even the professional association, but really it's a great opportunity now for conversations like this, where we have organisational members, university contributors, and the professional association jointly contributing to this sort of dialogue around skilling and enabling accountants, if you like, to really have the knowledge and the practices that they need to comfortably deal with these technological challenges. You know, there are elements here you'll see around resource sharing, things to do with work integrated learning, the networks, you know, the LinkedIn, the Facebooks, the TikTok, all of these sorts of elements are terrific in terms of ensuring informally and formally that early career accountants are well prepared and maintain that preparedness. You're prepared one day and your skills can be obsolete the next. So this is this importance around the lifelong learning, the agency, the evolution. In other words, you're making your careers happen for you by working actively on career development, and particularly around the technology skills required to maintain that currency in the profession. And of course, just finally, there are things to do with the micro-credentials, short stuff, opportunities to work in partnership with universities, organisations themselves, the CPA as well, to really sort of develop specific units, modules, components that really hit the mark when it comes to particular needs around whether it's data analytics, programming, something in computer science, something around the ethics of blockchain, something to do with client understanding. The more informed that early career accountants can be here, really, the better. And I think that's really where we're arguing from the data and from this study, a great opportunity for this sort of co-creation to occur. Thank you very much for that. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you, Denise, Grant and Rahat, for what has been a very interesting presentation. We've got some questions coming through the Q&A, and your finishing point was right on the mark for the first question around micro-credentials, because there's a question about how universities and employers and professional bodies can give visibility to digital competencies much more in more detailed transcripts and badges. And, I know CPA Australia has just launched its digital finance micro-credential. I know at the University of Melbourne we're working on micro-credentials as well. I presume you're starting to see a lot of that. Was that something you were hearing about in the interviews?
I'm happy to take that question. So yes, absolutely. So I think, and there's obviously a big discussion around this in the higher education sector, I think worldwide at the moment, about the future of the university and shift possibly to shorter courses and learners scaffolding their learning and taking different parts from different disciplines and to create their own program of study. And certainly among those in the smaller organisations, I think as Grant mentioned earlier, and in the public sector where they were less exposed to technology, there wasn't an appetite for them to go to return to do a postgraduate course, for example, but they wanted that bite-sized learning in specific technologies, and not just how to use them, but also then how to leverage them and how they might relate to the accounting standards, and then how they might be embedded into workflows. So it extended beyond simply understanding how they worked. I'm not sure if Grant or Rahat have anything to add to that.
No, look, I think that's fine. I know there's probably a range of questions there, so we'd like to keep answering as many as we can to help and contribute.
Thanks, Grant and Denise. One of the other issues that seems to be arising here is just the intersection between the technology and the accounting and finance functions in organisations, and also within the university, and how we integrate those. You talk about embedding the technology in the workflows and things like that. Where is this training coming from? Where are the skills coming from? Is this a technology-driven thing, or is it an accounting-driven thing?
I think it's a question of both, and I think it's a question of integrating both. So there is a big focus in higher education, certainly in Australia, about transdisciplinary learning. So connecting the two disciplines and not necessarily formalising it through a double degree, but really working more closely. And I know at Macquarie University, where Grant and Rahat are based, they've got that greater collaboration between the accounting and finance area and between the IT area. So really, we've got the same students, but picking off units and experiences from both different areas and really integrating those is important. And I think that's one aspect, I suppose, of the accountant's role is being that tech savvy and understanding how to use and leverage technologies. But we mustn't forget that there's that whole emphasis on problem solving, decision making, adding value and communication, which perhaps the technologists are not so, that's not their strength perhaps. So while there's absolutely an overlap, there's also a separation in my view.
Yeah, I have to agree with you that I've actually got an honorary appointment over in our engineering school, and while they've got some great technical competencies over there, I get really worried when they start to try and solve any business sort of related problems because they don't understand the accounting context and the business context, and that's where I think our accounting graduates are much more well equipped to acquire some technical skills and then play to solve those business problems rather than being scared about the technologists taking them over. And in fact, I think a lot of the problems arise when the technologists engineer a solution that doesn't actually solve the business problem because they don't understand the business requirements of what's going on. One of the other issues that arises here, you talk a lot about agency and lifelong learning. How does one approach that? There's risks here of acquiring a technology skill that is rapidly outdated given the pace of technology, but also where you go to make sure that you can embed that rather than just getting a click and point type technology training course.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. That lifelong learning, the agency aspects, things like that. Those things are as much, if you like, a mindset and an attitudinal sort of set of responses, also that sort of manifest themselves in behaviours. So obviously people that might finish a particular course, let's say it's at university or another higher education context, they go into the workforce, they're kind of evolving, they do lots of, in-house training for various things. We're upskilling all the time. We'll get people that might come and do, let's say, an MBA on top of their accounting degree in due course, or they shift and they acquire particular skills. But I think it's very much an attitude, and that sort of is also manifest in our experience, not just in this study, but I think just more broadly when we've dealt with managers and groups like accountant graduates and also the students, is it's really the positivity that comes around that. So managers really respond to, from our experience, the positivity and the willingness to learn from their early career accountants and also students who are on, let's say, work integrated learning programs. So those sort of attitudes manifest in behaviours, willingness to learn, own a mistake from time to time, which I think is really important. We all make mistakes, but learning from those mistakes, those are the sorts of things that I think we all sort of recognise. And I think, if anything, it really sort of helps, people manage their careers far better. Honesty and a bit of authenticity around that is really, really good in the sense that managers themselves acknowledge those sorts of things. That's our sort of experience, and that lifelong learning, particularly whether it's technology, but other developments, there's geopolitical things. We're always evolving in some way. Our own values will change as we get a little bit older. We have families and children and all the rest of it. Things like that, are constant for us. And so technology is one of these other sort of aspects of life, if you like, that we just have to sort of, if you like, move with and sort of evolve. We have to be honest too that not everyone responds as favourably to technology in organisations as others, but that's a reality, and we often say to our students and our early career accountants, we say, look, it's up to you how you adapt to that. You shape your career to the extent possible. You take responsibility for these skills. And look, some people find that they shift across into different parts of accounting. They might be in audit and they go into forensics, or they move and they adapt to the extent that they really enjoy working in these areas.
Thanks for that, Grant. It actually leads into the next question. You talk about the early career accountant having the responsibility. What's the responsibility of the employer in providing and supporting and nurturing graduates in their training? And how do you see the employers getting engaged in that?
All right. So are you okay if I take this question? I'm sorry, technology didn't know that presentation is on technology today. So I really apologize for that. There are a few things, Michael. This is a very interesting question, and there's a big debate and a lot of literature on this also. And we as accounting schools and departments and business schools talk around that how organizations can improve accounting skills, especially early career accountants when they start their career straight after graduations. So there are a few things. One is what organizations can do, and what graduates can do themselves. Basically is more on focus on training, and very focused training. For example, new softwares coming in, training on that. Sometimes we have seen that students often, when they graduate, they are put into a task rather than training how that task is performed and how technology is worked. That is something which we get that information quite a lot from our graduates. Second is regular updates, sort of boosters sessions organized by companies. I think that they are also very, very important. Sort of refresher courses which help people to improve their skills, not only improve, but at the same time to stay in touch with those skills. There are a lot of courses, like recently CPAs really has offered courses like micro-credentialings and so on, encouraging staff to take those courses so they can stack those courses into
I think we've lost Rahat to technical issues again.
Okay, I don't mind continuing on from there. I think one of the things that really shone through in the workplace, we've obviously spoken at length about micro-credentials and formal training, was around the informal learning and around the role of networks. And that was really very important in the larger organisations, and something that perhaps professional associations might want to pick up on for the smaller businesses. Those, whether it's on-the-job training or whether it's learning communities or online forums, or there was a really a sense among the respondents about the participants about that richness of that informal learning and sharing. So one might attend training and then they would cascade that through the organisation by sharing resources and how that technology is used. I can see a number of questions coming through there, so I'll leave it at that, Michael.
Thanks. I'm going to combine the next two questions because they're asking a similar question in different ways. It's about divergence in your results and diversity in your results. Is there geographical diversity, and is there diversity across the different roles between financial accountants or management accountants in the sort of things that you're seeing as the desired career skills?
So in terms of the sample, we only captured, in terms of the region that they responded, I think they were quite across the board for the early career accountants, and we actually didn't capture the region for the management. So we didn't drill down at this stage into differences by geography. We found, in terms of the area of accounting they're in, that around half of the early career accountants are actually from financial accounting, whereas about 1/5 were from the areas of management accounting. And then we had a mix across the rest, for risk, and audit and assurance, corporate and commercial finance, tax, and then other areas as well. And we haven't as yet, and we are still working through kind of the nuances, more nuances among the data, but we haven't captured any real differences in terms of the impact of technology and their preparedness for technology among those different areas. Remembering that our focus was on those areas, it was on the impact and preparedness rather than their actual use of different technologies, which is more obviously aligned with the study that you conducted, Michael, and others. So as yet, no, we haven't seen any nuances for those two areas, for those two factors, I should say.
So as you're looking at those skill sets, there's a question here about specific accounting-related software that is made use of. And obviously, when we're teaching them at university, we might use MyOb, Xero, SAP, a range of different things. How do we ensure that we're making the right choices in that and that we're preparing them in a way that enables them to go, given that we don't know what their employer is actually going to end up using?
Yeah, I think if Rahat's able, I know you've just joined again, Rahat, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but it might be good for you to answer that question about which, because I know our own university grapples with which actual software you should train the students in, and it's really all around having a broader understanding and then how it can be applied in a range of different contexts. So Rahat, maybe you want to address that question about choosing the optimal software that's going to help prepare them for future work. You're on mute, Rahat.
It's still saying starting. It's
we can hear you now.
Yeah, is it? All righty. Okay, thanks, Denise. Once again, I apologize. I didn't expect all these. And there are a few things which we really work very closely on students and help them to prepare in terms of softwares and so on. Some of these, it depends which subjects unit students take or the course student takes. We do teach students through Xero. We do teach MYOB, QuickBooks. At the same time, we help students in Microsoft's all packages or operating system. For example, Excel spreadsheet is commonly used by management accountants. We help students to understand. So what they do is they do different tasks, for example, determination of cost of a product and so on. So these are the few of the common sort of softwares which are used by small organizations or medium-sized organizations, and spreadsheets are mostly used by large-sized companies, are used by most of the universities in Australia.
Can I just add to that as well, and also, I guess, integrating another question around that was in the Q&A about the role of the employer. And while Rahat's made a good point there about selection of different software, there is that problem with they're continuously changing, and also a smaller business might be using one type and a larger business another, and the same with public and private sector. And to me, that's around trying to give the students as much exposure as possible to those different contexts. And that could be, as Grant mentioned earlier, it could be through guest speakers, it could be through authentic learning where they're working on real live client data using one software for one type of organization and sector. And then they're, for example, they integrate that, they have a project with another client, which is from another type of work context. And then combine that again with an internship where they're getting broad exposure. So to me, that's, and I really feel quite passionately, I guess I'm the Director of Work Integrated Learning at ECU, so it's all about integrating work with learning. But, you know, the onus is not just on the individual or the higher education institution, it's also on the employers themselves to really provide as many opportunities as they can and collaborate with universities to give students as much exposure as they can to all these different things. And we can't do it alone. We need that support from employers.
Good distinction to think about the difference between sort of educating and training. So it's providing that diverse exposure so that then they can go into a specific trainings on the tools that they're using in that organisation that they end up being employed with. I know at Melbourne we do Xero in first year, SAP in second year, and then they get to third year and we expose them to things like caseware for audit to again give them that diversity so that they can move around. The final question, because we're right at time, is really about getting access to some of these technologies and access to experience with these technologies. We're seeing workplaces that some of the early career people were saying, it's not tech savvy enough in my workplace, or if I'm in a smaller organisation, I can't get to use the cutting edge technology, or if I'm not even employed in an organisation yet, how do I get access to that cutting edge technology to upskill?
To me, that's the role of CPA, that's the role of the professional association. And, students can be members at quite limited cost, certainly in Australia. And, they have a very important role to play here in collaboration with, with the education sector and organisations. But I think they can absolutely fill that gap through some of the things that they are actively developing, such as micro-credentials. Perhaps you might have something else to add or grant to that.
Yeah, I think the other points that, Denise, I think you have really picked micro-credentials. Most of the universities are now going for micro-credentials. But at the same time, new technologies, for example, blockchain and similar technologies in forensics and forensic accounting and related fields, they are also important and crucial for students. So universities should work with the professional accounting organization. For example, we are working with CPA Australia on not only on micro-credentials, but at the same time on blockchain and developments for students. So these are the skills often employers they demand from, expect from Macquarie, from universities. And these are the skills which are needed for any graduate. So students don't need to invest a lot. Universities don't need to invest a lot. This is something which one can work with various companies. And at Macquarie, we are working with different organizations and professional organizations, including CPA Australia, for these sort of technologies.
Well, that brings us to the close of the questions, and we're out of time. Thank you, Grant, Denise, and Rahat. We really appreciate the fantastic presentation today and the interesting insights. From my perspective, it looks like the future of accounting is as exciting as it always has been, and we've got a lot of lifelong learning that's never going to end as we seek to solve the world's problems using accounting, and working together between industry, CPA Australia and other professional bodies and the university sector is the way we're going to be able to address that. So on behalf of everybody who's attending, a virtual round of applause for your fantastic work here and the support of CPA of that work, and I'll hand back to Jana.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I just want to say thank you to our panelists as well, to Denise, Grant, and Rahat. Before we close, I would like to draw your attention to the CPA Australia website, on which we will publish more technology-focused research very soon. For example, on central bank digital currencies. We have also recently released podcasts on central bank digital currencies as well as on fintech. And we recorded a podcast with Denise and Rahat. Denise and Rahat, sorry, I just thought it was also Grant, on this particular research study that will also be made accessible on our website. And now finally, I also want to add that within the next 3 working days, you will receive the link to the recording via email, and that email will also include the link to the study as well as an evaluation survey. I would be very grateful if you could provide feedback through that survey. That would allow us to provide more very insightful events and webinars in the future. Thank you very much, everyone.